The one reason why it's good to have somebody in the control room is that they can keep an eye on the chat box if I start talking away and I don't see somebody's question or point, and I want to make sure. Oh, hey, Kathy, I just posted the Hangout link if you want to try to come on, but I don't want to put you on the spot. Don't want to force anybody to be in the control room because it means you get put to work. Have you noticed that? All right. All right. Good painting exercises turned in by you guys. Let me share my screen. Let me refresh the screen so that we can, in case anybody has uploaded some new work. Gail, is it okay? I'm going to start with your sketches that were turned in that we didn't get to last time. My fault. Done with pastels. Pastels are chalk or charcoal. I'm not sure, or a combination of them. Did you want to tell us anything about the? And I know you these were done some time ago. You just wanted to uh, share some of your sketches with me, and I'm glad you did. You know what I notice about these is they're so real and they feel like real people. They feel their spirits. I feel like I know them. You have a real insight into animals and you're able to capture their spirit, their personality, and they feel like living characters. There's so much life in these sketches. It startles me every time I look at them. Catherine says a very kind looking wolf. Yes, he's so wise looking and thoughtful and so alive. And the other thing I'm noticing is you don't overwork it. You say just enough and you give him all the life in the world, and yet it's not overdrawn or over labored, and it doesn't look like you were struggling with drawing. It just lives on the page. They both do. Just enough marks to look at the whiskers on this guy. I can almost feel the saliva in his mouth. Yeah, the great eyes. I know. Okay, and then Gail's other sketch was this, and this is it looks like water media. Gail, correct me if I'm wrong, but uh, what I love about this sketch is it shows the power of the silhouette. Silhouettes often say everything. You don't need anything more than the silhouette to get your statement across, get your point across, get your scene across. And the silhouette underscores the importance of the design element we've talked about, maybe the most important one, and that's shape, right? Shapes say everything. That's what our brains use to interpret the world around us. And all we need is the shape. All we need is the outline very often. Outline in a color contrast or a value contrast. So these trees feel so well developed and so well observed, and yet we're not seeing any of the inside detail, are we? We're just seeing some shapes, and because she's connected them to the foreground here, and I'm not sure whether that's a rock formation or what the black is at the bottom, but they're all connected to that shape. So they're all connected. So now they become one complex shape because they are They're contiguous, right? So um, it's not, uh, I mean, it's arguable. I mean, it's not three little shapes and one big shape, or three little shapes, one very different shape and one very tall shape. It's, it can be, I mean, you can argue it that way, but it's also just one big, interesting, complex shape full of expression. And it fills the whole page, even though there's nothing but white space over here on the right. Yeah, it's, uh, Gail, do you want to tell us about the color, or how you got your dark, your very convincing dark? It sure does look like water media, and it's beautiful brushwork. So sensitive. Catherine's talking about the dogs again. Looks like he's had a good day, the wolf. I love the softness of the wolf drawing. Yeah, it's so sensitive. Catherine's asking, how did you make the whiskers on the dog? Gail says the wolf was done with pastels. The dog and shoe, we're going to see the shoe next, were done with charcoal. And the palm tree was done with weak black watercolor. Okay, black watercolor right out of the tube. Thank you, Gail. Gail loves the perspective. Uh-huh. Yeah, they're so well observed. The trunks look so real. The shapes of them, the fronds, they all work together. And yet they're silhouettes, but they're more convincing than a lot of detailed drawings with 1,000 lines in them, right? Yeah, and the shoes are, what's particular. So this is done with charcoal, soft charcoal, and she has caught the gesture of both these objects and she's overlapped them. So now they become one shape, one interesting form, and gesture is paramount. It's really, this is really a drawing about a, a gesture, two gestures, but grouped as one. And not only gesture, but now it almost feels like she's taken that extra step. And Gail, I wonder if this is the case. You've gone then from the gesture of the two forms to the contour, where we really feel, we're running along and we feel the stitching of the shoe. It almost feels like you went in and put in each stitch along the top of the sandal. That's how tactile it is and how carefully observed. And even the slits in the leather, we see the dimensionality of it. We see the cut on the leather, the little breathing spaces. And then we feel the texture inside the shoe. Maybe it's, I don't know, part of a shirt or a hat, but it's tucked inside the shoe, and we feel that very different texture from the leather. Phoebe says, palm trees make a nice design. We enjoy them in our desert. Oh yeah, I love palm trees. We have some down here too. Uh, um, Gail says, should there be a background with the sandal drawing? Not necessarily. That's right. We were going to talk to you about backgrounds. Um, and then she says, I love these sandals. I'm glad that shows. Yeah, it does. It just shows so much care, and it shows that your eye and your imaginary hand, it's like you were running your finger along the contour of the sandal, and going very slowly the way we're taught in contour drawing. and it all communicates. And that's what Nicolaides was trying to tell us, that this comes through it. Everybody relates to it. You can just be patient, slow down, and be patient enough to re-experience the shoe tactily with your finger, and then your drawing instrument. Well, then it'll come right through to the viewer. The viewer will feel as if they're running their fingers along the shoe or the form. And yeah, it's a comfy still life. The subject matter is comfy. So background, you don't need backgrounds in every drawing. You don't need it here. I mean, the stars of this scene were the fabric and the sandal, right? Now, background does become important in lots of illustration, right? Because you're in a narrative mode, and the viewer has entered a story, and you've got to keep the viewer in that story and not let them wander, not break their 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 belief in you and belief in the scene you're giving them, by everything has got to be kind of well drawn and well suggested, and then a sense of place has to be established in most cases. Not every page illustration needs a sense of place or a setting or a background, but most of them do. Illustration's a little different than this kind of work, so no, I don't think this needs a background. Here you give us a background. I mean, I mean, those background, those distant trees are part of the background. It's all we need. I mean, you could keep adding things. You could have, you know, pelicans flying back there or something, or a formation of seabirds or something, or clouds, but you don't need it. You've already given us a taste of the setting. And the dogs are portraits. They portraits don't always need, and they're studies. They're character studies. So yeah, so you didn't need backgrounds in any of these. But if this was on the cover of a kid's book, you for the reader coming across the book or looking at the cover, you'd want to give some more detail so to invite them into the story. So you might want to place what is he going to be in a ranch setting? Is he going to be out with other animals? Is there going to be a child in the background? You'd want to try to bring the reader into the book, make them pick up the book by giving them a little more information and showing some sort of a relationship between maybe characters in the story, relating to the dog or something like that. Does that make sense? Oh, y'all are giving Gail some great comments on her sketches. So yeah, as we go into painting more and more, and it's so much fun, one tends to want to just paint all the time and forget about your drawing and particularly your gesture and contour drawing. Uh, and so it's really great to be reminded of the power of drawing and how important it is for us to keep up doing sketches of our pets, of our kids, gesture sketches from YouTube videos. Great. Y'all are giving making some great observations. Anything else on Gail's sketches, or Gail, do you have any questions for us are you feeling better about background? I mean, if this guy was, if he was on the cover of a book, I'd want to, and you've seen covers like this on books, like chapter books or picture books. There will be a sense of setting in there to place this wolf in a story setting of some kind. Treetops, mountains, snow, Indian village, whatever it is. Okay, Gail, thank you for sharing those with us. I hope you share more with us. Um, Let's go back. Let's look at Phoebe's folder. Phoebe is charged into the latest color exercises, and I'm so glad she did. And here she's doing the exercise where she's taking the colors across the color wheel. And she's bumped them into each other and washes. Phoebe, do you have some observations from the exercise? How did you feel about this exercise, and did you see anything that was a little new to you, or had you done something like this before? Did you discover some new colors that you didn't even know existed? Be great to hear your reactions to the exercise. Let's go through the all the ones you've done here, all the things you've turned in. More of the same where we're pizza slice color theory. We've got our dominant color and the best friend colors next to him, and they are all mixing it up with the contrast color across the wheel from the dominant color, right? And we're going to be interested in all the changes in the colors when you sort of mush them into each other, wet into wet. Phoebe says she found oh, Phoebe says she found that some colors like to blend, others seem to repel. Okay, that's interesting. Sylvia says, I like the way you organize the lines of color. That's in the previous one. Sylvia is talking about this one. She's very, very clever. And uh, Catherine says, my students would love this. They like to try to make umber, burnt umber color blends. I think that's what you're saying, umber, like those neutral tones, browns and grays and darks. And Phoebe says this was a fun exercise. Um, and Gail says, I love the way you've introduced these colors. Great job. Yeah, these are really nice. And that's interesting about some. Now, sometimes when they do seem to be repelling each other, you just have to give them a little more of a nudge so you can get that mashup happening. Because what we want to do is see what what this Kelly green has done to this red down here. See that darkened area? Sometimes it doesn't happen on its own. You got to kind of twirl it. I tell you not to overwork your colors, but even so, sometimes you got to be the boss of the mixture and just make it happen. And it will happen. Even if at first they seem to repel a little bit, they just haven't warmed up to each other yet. See, I would have expected a whole lot more. Looks like you put on this one, you put the orange in second. So the orange was going into the cool notes, the BFF, best friend forever color tripart up here. And so you went in and completely neutralized these cool parts, but you could have pushed it with your brush just a little more and maybe bring it out in different directions to see what um, you can get even more um, color varieties out of these mixtures if you push it. It's sort of like you did you did begin to push them a little bit, and then you let it alone, which is good. I mean, this is a great way to start. And then we're after these strange, hard to categorize reactions that happen. And sometimes you do need to sort of push it a little bit to as here we're getting some good mixtures and interesting colors that You don't have names for these colors. We don't want to label these colors with words, but look how beautiful these could be in a painting. And you're figuring out, I mean, these are the colors you'll paint your scene with, your illustration with, or your landscape with, or seascape with, and you want to see how big of a color octave you can get out of these colors. There's a lot of experimenting left to do here, but you're already creating some beautiful broken tones, neutral tones, grays, and you can see how you could go pretty quickly, easily go to black with any one of these mixtures, right? So they're lovely, and you can go even further with it. Just keep mashing up um, the four colors, and then in some cases add more water, in some cases add more pigment to go darker, and you're kind of stuck with these colors for your scene, right? According to our approach to color in this class. Carol says, I love the gray that appears in so many of the mixtures. Phoebe says, oh, let's see, Catherine says, ombre nail polish term on YouTube means chiaroscuro blended colors. Yeah, those shadowy tones. And Phoebe says, thanks. I love working with color. I guess I need to be more bossy. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you want to be tentative too. You want both, right? And you got a real good start with these, and you can come up with a whole lot more colors than even these as you continue to work with it. So great exercise, great, and you got some beautiful neutral tones out of these. Congratulations. And I really appreciate and enjoy what you did with your color wheel. I didn't even think to do this. You've taken it one step further. You blended your opposite colors right on the wheel. I mean, I guess I did the big version of it, but haven't seen a student do it in a long time where they actually bravely went and started mixing the opposites into each other, going down toward the center and getting the blacks. What did you think of this exercise, Phoebe? Was it and congratulations on getting the darks you got. You got some great darks out of this. And that was the idea. That was the point. Catherine wants to know, what kind of watercolor brand are you using? It's so bright and powerful and bold. It is professional color. So this is a really good example of what we wanted to do in this color wheel exercise, and particularly where we were mixing the darks. We were marching toward the center, getting ever darker and ever increasing amounts of the complement color at the other end of the wheel. And the whole point was to go to these darks and get to jet black in the middle on either end. And and what's so successful about Phoebe's piece is that she did go to the darks, and it takes being a little bossy to do that. You gotta most of us paint for years way too light in our watercolors because we just don't know how to. We almost feel like we're not supposed to go dark, and dark is an important part of our composition, and can be overdone. But uh, boy, I don't know which worse, not having enough dark or having too much dark. I'm starting to think it's not having enough dark because you need those accents. Judith said, this is quite a challenging color wheel exercise. Yeah, it's a powerful thing. Phoebe says, it was time consuming, but I enjoyed doing it. I use Daniel Smith, 6 colors of Daniel Smith. Great. Daniel Smith brand. They have their own catalog, their own online art supply website dealership, but they're also carried by all the other dealers. Okay, so that's a great example of where to take that color exercise where you're mixing darks from the complements. And just to, in case I was not clear in those videos, Phoebe's doing it just right here. This is we're in the way we're using color in these lessons is the singular color contrast. The three best friend colors are sharing one complement, one complementary color, just for economy and simplicity's sake. And it's faster to paint this way and you don't get confused. And it's the complement of the central color, the dominant color in the BFF lineup. These are analogous colors. We're, we're abbreviating it, calling them best friend forever colors. But yeah, so they're all sharing the blue green that is the complement or the conflict color, the contrast color of the straight up red, fire engine red. I hope I made that clear. Judith says, I'm going to try this with different saturations. Yes, that's what you're supposed to do. And say dark like this, 50% and 30%, 20%. That would be a great exercise, Judith. And that's the idea, because you want to see it. You want to see this happening. You want to see these neutrals happening in the light tones and then in the darkest dark tones as well. And you want to be really comfortable and fluent in all those, that whole span. And it's so much fun. How did you get the little spider web between the colors? uh, uh, Catherine's asking spider. Yeah, so she's talking about the little blossoms here. Where I can answer that, Phoebe. You can too, but it's where the water. It's where some water dropped on, some clean water, and then it just wicked up into the earlier paint passage. And you can. It's just a little tributary. It's like, well, it looks like a satellite photo of the Mississippi Delta seen from 300 miles up, and that's what water does when it wicks through capillaries, the cotton fibers or the muddy delta banks. It just carved right into the pigment, you see, as it wicked. So it means the water got a little ahead of itself, clean water. It's a nice effect too, right? And you can imagine doing it deliberately in some paintings for different purposes. I mean, these could be tree trunks going into the shadows of the forest, right? And Phoebe says these were the colors that wanted to repel rather uh, than blend. Yeah, and it does happen that way. Some colors are some pigment is coarser than other pigment. So it's a whole different chemical reaction, physical reaction when those two pigments suspended in liquid, when they meet each other. Phoebe says they reminded me of mushrooms. Yeah, huh. Yes, they do have a very organic fungus sort of quality. I'm admiring the darks you've gotten here. These are beautiful darks, and with our darks, we want them to have to retain their color identity. So when you're mixing the two colors, you want to make sure, well, the dark you settle on that you like and you want to use in your painting, you want to say, well, I want it to be this purple, this purplish dark, or I want it to be this greenish dark, and uh, don't be confused about it. Just make a statement and then make a decision which way you want to go, and then go with it, so that your darks all still have a color identity and they're not wishy-washy, kind of waffling in the paint passage, waffling from one color to the opposite color back and forth, because it's confusing. Gail's asking, what value range did you work toward? We'll see what Phoebe's answer to that is. But I'm hoping she was working toward, in the very center of the wheel, toward, something close to 90%, or if not 100%. Sometimes with some colors, you have to take it all the way to 100% saturation, and you're completely covering up that white paper, and there's no light escaping. It's like a black hole. That's your 100% saturation. Okay, let's see if we got any. And there's her. This is so great that you're doing this with different saturation. So she did the 10-part color wheel with full saturation, 100%. So almost using it like poster paint or tempera paint right out of the jar. And then here's her 30% saturation. Same colors, same tubes of paint, whole different color experience, right? They're they're not, in fact, they don't, they're not the same colors when you start letting the white of paper shine through. It's a completely different look, isn't it? And you can use all of these in the same painting, of course. You've just doubled your options here. Yeah, Phoebe said she was working with full saturation back before. So yeah, so I hope the 30% and the full saturation, 100% saturation, I hope that was useful to you and gave you ideas. I bet it did. Great homework. I have to give you gold stars for this whole folder of good work. Now let's look at these for a second. As you're mixing these, when you'll be doing this on scratch paper, maybe trying to find the color you want for something in your painting, and then you'll have to be, once you decide, oh, I like this yellowish purple, mostly yellow, but it's got some charcoal gray tones from the purple in there, but I want it to have a yellow cast, and then stick with it. That's the color you've picked, and you've got to be consistent with that passage. Where you will get into trouble, or where people will start to say, oh, it's muddy, is when you're sort of in the paint passage, you're waffling between a yellow purple or a purple yellow, and it's in the same spread, unless you have a deliberate reason for changing it up like that. But do you know kind of what I'm saying? uh, you want to commit to one side of the strip or the other, you know, as you take your brush loaded with pigment, loaded with wash, take it over to your illustration. All right, how are we doing? Okay, now I don't know whose upload this was. Anybody want to claim it? And this was a real nice exercise. You can see. Oh, it's Judith. Judith, yes, you got it up. Good, 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 good. I'm sorry, I didn't see the name when I was looking at it earlier. Um, Good for you. And this is just terrific. I was admiring it earlier. Your scale, 0% to 100%, right out of the tube. Okay. Did you enjoy that part of the exercise? And then your color swatches were beautifully done. You took some real care with this and some time. And I know it takes a while to do these, but you were so consistent. And what's really nice about your little strips is I don't see any um, I don't see any brush marks. I don't see any clumping of paint. I don't see any covering up of white paper. I see beautiful professional glazes that 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 are the way a glaze is are the way glazes are supposed to look. We can see the white paper behind it, and we can see the underpainting very clearly through it, right? So it's like she just put a plastic colored gel over another colored gel to get this lovely underneath quality. Look how much depth this simple overlay has given this form. First, it was just a pale red disc, and then she striped some red over it. And then she striped the complement over it, which darkened it considerably, but also gave even more life to the underpainting, the red under there. And it makes the red even more lively, that contrast, right? The red even more lively under under the green. I mean, isn't that interesting? Don't you want to get lost in there? So it's a great control of saturation of 30% saturation. Really good control. It's a good, really good example of what um, I was trying to talk about in the videos. Look how, because her passages were in such control, she got these great statements. Look at this yellow across the green. Look what it did to the green. Look what the red did to the green, because her brush had just the right amount of the right water pigment mixture ratio in it. She probably worked it out on scratch paper first before going on to her exercise sheet. It gives you an idea of what could start to happen in a painting, right? When you do this. Phoebe says, your colors are very pleasing to look at. Judith says, this was so much fun. Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah, it looks like it was fun for you to do. And it's so satisfying for us to see it. I mean, it just feels good to look at um, control of a medium or mastery of a medium or a paint passage or an exercise. You just exhibited really good control here. Gail says, I've been too timid in working with my colors. I'll have to be more forceful. Oh, Judith is lamenting the too wet spot up in the blue. Yeah, well, just a drop of clear water just ended up on the picture or dripped off your brush. Well, we can't be masters of everything, and we can't control an entire painting, surface of an entire painting. Um, it's just not possible. You're dealing with too many variables, too many moving parts, all those drips of water, all the conditions of the paper. You just can't control the whole surface. Remember the creators of in Persia, ancient Persia, the rug the rug artists, the one, those great rugs and their designs, their stitches, they would deliberately put a, a messed up stitch in a tapestry or a rug, and it was their reminder to themselves and to the world that only Allah is perfect. So just to underscore the point, I'm going to deliberately make a mistake here. I always tell myself that when paint drips unwelcome onto my final art. But what's fun is there's no real wrong things that happen in watercolor. You might decide you want to use this effect in something. That's why people sprinkle salt on their still wet, still damp painting, because it will do something similar to that. The salt crystals will suck up water from around the paint passage, and it will create more interesting spidery effects. Um, yeah, Catherine says the colors remind me of a patchwork quilt, very warm and inviting. Patchwork, yeah. And Judith says, my previous teachers did not understand this at all. Oh, well, shame on them. But yeah, it's this idea of glazing. That's what I love about that Bud Biggs book. He leads off with it. It's his most important exercise. Besides, it's just fun to do, fun to practice. Okay, good. Yay, Judith. Let's look at your next one. And you were making some bamboo leaf shapes with your brush. And I don't know if does your brush come to your brush might be not have a real sharp point, and it might be difficult to make a real sharp point, but just keep working with your bamboo shapes. The glazes are beautiful. The colors are beautiful. I mean, these colors are fantastic. And can you imagine a illustrations in a children's picture book that just have this kind of wash color style with these bright colors and all this white space at play? I mean, it's a dance. Just this is just something we want to look at. Um, and it gets particularly interesting when you're glazing over other colors here this way. The shape of your bamboo leaf, will just practice with it. You start off barely touching the tip of the brush to the paper. Make sure your brush has plenty of solution on it, pigment, color, and then as you move up the uh, bamboo leaf, you're starting to press down on the brush a little bit and making it fatter. You're squishing it on the paper to broaden the leaf. And then and then you make the curve like the fish hook, and then you are slowly lifting up the brush from the paper. You're reducing the weight on the brush hairs, but you're still keeping that central point on the paper, that sharp point, and that little point of the brush, the tip of the brush is the last thing to lift off the paper. And it's just what do you call it? A muscle memory sort of thing where your hand starts to get the hang of it, and then you sort of know how to do it. But just hard to describe. You just have to play with it until you can feel it. Judith says, no, it's the painter, not the brush. Okay, well, you're giving your brush the benefit of the doubt, so just keep working with that brush until you have it. And there's a sensitivity that starts to develop with your hand and the fine motor control muscles in your hand, and you start to get it. But where most of us aren't used to painting or don't have any experience with it, so you don't realize all the subtlety, the subtle motor movements that are taking place, and the sensitivities. Also, being familiar with your brush, what you are the factor you are getting control of already are your glazes and your color mixtures, and that's an important part of the equation. And now it's just your muscles in your hand as you practice. um, let's see. Oh, the conversations, the discussions in here are so good, guys. Catherine says middle exercise, the curves give them all eyes, mouth, and you have a bunch of live little critters. Okay, we'll look at that in a second. Judith says, I wanted to get the exact color that you had in the video. So I was messing with the green and not concentrating on the motions. Ah, okay, got it. Well, see, what you focused on, you mastered and controlled. So well done, well done. Now the shapes and the motions will be next on the list. Great. Yay, I'm so proud of you for getting this up and letting us see it, sharing it with us. Thank you. Let's go over here to, gosh, that got big. Sylvia's piece. Now, I think we saw these last time, and so I moved those over there. If we didn't, we did see these, didn't we? Sylvia, let me know if did we see the bear too? Well, if you tell me we didn't, we'll come back. I do remember the fish and the color wheel, which are beautiful, by the way. Still think they're beautiful. I mean, that's the thing about watercolor. Once fresh, it's always fresh. If you've gotten it fresh, it kind of stays fresh to the viewer forever. Even if you were the one that did it, even if you're looking at it every day, there's still this aliveness to it, this freshness to it. Turn this, I didn't rotate this so they're going left to right. Instead, they're going up. But isn't that as beautiful as it was a couple weeks ago when we saw it? The wet into wet exercise, and there's some glazing going on too. There's some wet onto the dry paper. There's some wet into wet, and there's some dropping in jewels, colored jewels on the fish skin, fish surface, to create a fish scale quality. You got to love watercolor. And there's a good, generous, alive color wheel, 10-point color wheel. So there's that. And then this new folder she's turned in. What's this one? No? Here. More fishes, a beautiful scene. Now here's Sylvia has given us a background. She's overlaid fish. She's given us a sense of place. She's given us a stage set, little fish backdrops back here, little castles, walls, something you'd see in a big tank. And she did negative painting in some of her fronds, some of her uh, sea plants, water plants. And she came up with some nice darks. See how the dark fish back there pushes out, helps us define, helps us see the other shapes. That's what darks are for a lot of times. That's why shadows are so important in a picture. Helps direct our eye, helps bring things into focus, helps us to see shapes in front of it. Yeah, so a whole scene, a whole developed scene she's done here. And we're into it with her. Beautiful fish shapes too. And then I was so pleased to see this one. Let me get it smaller though. This is a great example of the tree exercise. And I'll just say a couple things, and I'd be interested to hear how you guys are reacting to this. As a final art painting, it's a piece of final art. It's a piece of final art. You could put a mat on this and hang it in your home or put it in a show, put it in your portfolio, but it's so expressive. So it's a great example of that Bud Biggs tree painting exercise where he had the the cool toned, cool colored glaze, underglaze, the underpainting of the blue, that mild blue back there, first shape, and then the tan over it, the warm, and then suddenly you get this push pull thing happening with the cool and the warm, the cool pushing back or falling back, and then the warm advancing toward us, and it immediately grabs the viewer and holds the viewer, and then you can begin to glaze over that underpainting of the two, the warm and cool together, and then ultimately you're putting in the darks. And I'm so proud of Sylvia's darks that she's got here, and the darks that she did clearly made from mixing the colors, the warms and cool colors. um, so mix in a very natural way. The the uh, the she has turned them into accent notes in just the right way, and she didn't jump to them too soon. She waited till pretty much the scene was pretty much in place, and the colors were all pretty much down, and the glazes and the underpaintings. Then she could go in with her very naturally mixed uh, uh, complements, her darks, turning them into darks, and then she can put her calligraphy in there, and she's got it in leaves, these beautiful pine needles, and then these shadow parts side of the tree, and under the branches all the form shadow happening on the tree trunk. And isn't that just gorgeous? Catherine says this tree is lovely, great job of glazing, so believable, as are the real tree, so as are the real trees. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, it's just it bespeaks of of the best in watercolor. And when Sylvia put down her paint strokes, her paint passages, she was sure-footed, and she was bold, and she wasn't dilly-dallying around with her color mixtures, right? I mean, these are decisive color. Every mark is decisive. Every color tone is sure and confident, and that's what makes this sing so well. And the piece is confident from the top of its the top of the tree to the trunk to the roots, top to bottom. It's consistently strong. And she saved her details and her, I think this is the case, she saved her details and her accenting to the very last part of the execution. Is that right? You want to correct me if I'm wrong, Sylvia, but I think that's exactly what you did. And it's a great example of that tree exercise. So pretty. And this background dark here is so nice. The foliage down here, the darks, the gentle darks you created down here, they're not upstaging the tree. They're not as intense as the contrasts in the tree, the way you conserved white space, where you needed to. It's just all really nice. And I love that you'd used a pine tree, maybe a tree indigenous to your area, that um, a conifer, and you didn't just fall for the conventional tree. You made a real tree out of it. Sylvia says, yes, that was the sequence that she did. And she says, the tree did not look good until the dark. I know, isn't that funny how that works? Yeah. So you're pleased with this one too. You see what we're talking about, don't you, Sylvia? And just the way you conserve the white paper. Man, I could look at this. I could look at this for an hour just enjoying it. But see how you have to be kind of bold with your color and just go in, just trust the process is going to work for you. Since you're being patient with it and you're doing all the right steps in the right sequence, then you can start to be expressive with it because you're confident, you're trusting yourself with it. Sylvia says, I like this tree. Yeah. Judith says, this is so free, and I can almost feel a breeze flowing past. Love the white space on the lower part separating the tree from the background. Yeah, it makes the tree stand. It makes the tree the star, doesn't it? It gives him a little light bounce on both sides of the tree, like maybe the sun is behind the tree somewhere, or at least back there in that white space somewhere. Carol says, wonderful tree. Sylvia says, I used a flat brush some. It helped. Well, you used it very confidently. And yes, I guess that helped give your straight marks. You used it really well. So nice. I mean, this is a piece of final art. It's got the abstraction. It's got strong design, and we don't doubt it for a minute as a real tree, do we? As a real conifer. Uh, Gail says, this is a fine example of using the dark color successfully. Great. I'm so glad you guys see it. And yeah, and we can all do this. And look at in the meantime, as a byproduct, as a footnote, look at all the great color she created and invented out of these glazes. Look at these. You can't name this color. You don't want to, do you? You've got the cool, warm conflict happening, the vibration that's so special. But most of the color is some kind of neutral. That's the result of uh, mashing up the warm and cool color. But all those neutrals help you to see the brightness of the pure color that's underneath, right? Catherine says, very professional looking tree. Could be on a postcard. So sweet, Judith. Um, Yay. Okay. All right. Nice words, guys. Thanks for all the for being supportive to your fellow painters. So you're all uh, you're all so supportive. You found your painting group. You stick with these guys. You stick with these friends and stay with them. Oh, I still just want to keep looking at this. All right. What else have we got? All right. Another beauty. And now Sylvia has opened it up. She's created a bigger scene. She's actually put leaves on the trees, which we weren't doing, and she's given us a real forest back here. And do you want to tell us anything about your approach on this one? Judith. I mean, you've created you've took a perfunctory exercise and you've turned it into another piece of final art. You've given us some beautiful glazed darks, some beautiful aspen color here. So, I don't know, those oranges. I just love those oranges, and I love the the blue and brown of the tree in the foreground and the white paper. I can see examples of the flat brush at work. Nice approach. See, you can, when you get that foundation down, you get that you kind of know where you're going, then it frees you up to be, put in a few of those flourishes and a little bit of that self-expression, and you start riffing and doing your own dance because you know where this is going. You know what it's supposed to be doing. Catherine says, lovely fall feeling and lots of movement in the brushstrokes. Sylvia says, I was just trying to do painting behind. That was my main goal here. Okay, good. Well, I love all these little peekaboo spots you've got in the forest back there. You've got dark value, but you also left little holes for the light underpainting to shine through, and the white paper. And you've got some. I see the negative painting up here. These bright spots are foreground shapes, um, landforms, flora. Uh, in front of the darker shadow forms. So that is what that painting behind is all about. You could bring the orange, right, that white sliver on either side of the tree. uh, doesn't have to be quite so wide because it's meant to be, that white space is, at least in the Bud Biggs exercise, it's meant to be part of it's meant to be the outside edge of the tree itself. So that's what so if you wanted to do some more painting behind, you could bring some orange notes right up to the edge and just leave the white uh, tree edge, because that's what it is. The light is reflecting off the tree itself, the tree bark. It's sunshine bouncing off this form just along the edge. You see that when you go outside. You see it in photos a lot, and you see it yourself when you go outside on a bright sunny day and the light is coming around the sides of a form, and very often it's a light outline or a white outline around that delineates the uh, the figure rather than any kind of a dark outline. And it's good to start thinking of outlines as being white, in some cases, white paper. Okay. Oh, Carol says, I got the book and have just started to play. Yay. Carol says, so painterly on this. Yeah. Uh, Yeah, did I say Judith? I knew this painting is Sylvia's. Yeah, I'm sorry. Um, Sylvia says this example is in the Bud Biggs book, everyone. Yes. Uh, Judith says, love the background on the left side, particularly so alive. Yeah, isn't it? Isn't it so alive? And that, I love that too. I love all this light play. And then I also love the dark side on the right too. It makes a nice foil to all this liveliness over here on this side. Let me see how much I can blow this up. So I like that she has both in there, but this is so alive and so convincing. And there's a lot of economy of means here. Talk about getting 80% of the results with 20% of the efforts. It doesn't feel overworked, does it? It doesn't feel overlabored, overthought. It just says what it has to say and moves on and lets us fill in the rest. So we're painting with her. We're painting, the viewers painting the scene right along with her. As we look at the painting, we're co-creating with her. That's the magic of this kind of watercolor. Uh, the tree on upper right is more developed, and I like it. Colors are vibrant. Gail says, I love the freedom in these trees. You're not afraid of your subject. No, she sure isn't. Yeah, Thank you, Bud Biggs, for giving us these amazing exercises, right? All right. So, I'm ready to look at more. But anyway, this is the strong approach we can take with our watercolor by just being decisive, deliberate, trusting ourselves, trusting the process, knowing our colors and what they'll do, knowing that if you have a complementary pair at work in a painting with a singular color contrast and maybe two analogous support colors, on one side of the wheel to add a little richness, a little flavor, although they're not altogether necessary for it to work. But with those four colors and their mixtures and water and white paper, you can do anything. Okay. All right. I guess I have made my case on that. I've overstated it probably. Have we got the folders? Have we got everybody, all the folders? Now let's go into the individual pieces. I'm so proud of what you guys turned in tonight. I love this piece, Carol. You took the exercise in a different direction, and yet you were confident with it, and you gave us this incredible, almost abstract decorative tree and this incredible sky, and you kind of made your own statement, and you made a synthesis, and it's all of a piece, and you've got such great control of your glazes in here in the sky. I mean, there's no messy brushstrokes, there's no second guessing yourself. You're just going in and you're giving us shape and subtle color changes, wet into wet, wet on dry. You took your time with it and you've given us a tapestry. You didn't rush the process, I don't think. And you gave us the high contrast in the tree with the darks, and you created some great darks in there. Now, one of the things Bud Big says is when you're making the shapes inside the tree is not to make the shapes the same size, to make them all a little different. And I do see that you've made lots of different shapes inside the tree with your darks, but a lot of them are kind of the same size. So it certainly gives the tree a texture, and it certainly works on a design level and a decoration level. I think in your other one you change up shapes a lot more, but they're all sort of like the same sort of micro size, but they're still varied and they're still interesting and they get darker. I love how you the trunk is sort of deeper, darker, redder, and then it goes up and gets lighter. There's a gradation. There's all kinds of interesting stuff happening in the underpainting of the tree. Yeah, it does have that. Well, now that you've seen some examples of real loose trees, it does have the tight quality, but a lot of illustration has this sort of tightness to it. I mean, art directors, editors, viewers, readers, they love uh, tight illustration. So we're not knocking tight illustration. We're saying there's room for all of this. This has a lot of control in it, which is part of the success of the painting. So you can call it tight. I'll just call it controlled. I lost it. I'll call it control. And look what you've done here with well, I don't know what my Google Drive is doing now, but I was trying to get us to see. So, oh, well, I can't enlarge it, but I'm loving what you did with the green foreground down here. And you've got wet into wet. You've got like jewels, like light green, yellow green dropped into deeper green. You've got play in values. You've got all these different grass shapes, which are very stylized and abstract. I wouldn't call it a tight drawing. I'd call it like a stylized drawing. It's very well observed, and your branches are very lifelike, and your twigs, and it has a real living quality to it. And the sky is certainly alive. So Yeah, it's really quite effective. Catherine says has a spots, tapestry stitched together feeling. Yes. Uh, Catherine says your colors dance and move with lots of energy. Judith says I could look at that sky a long time. Curious about how you did it. Very nice. Carol says thanks. I like that. Control rather than tight. Yeah. Yeah. Neat colors, and you were reserved in your colors too. So that's great. Let the colors do their own singing. See your design elements carry this picture, and you you're you don't have to do a thing more to it for it to be a finished statement. And then this works in a whole different way. Now you're loosening up a little bit. It feels like, and and the color is great in this scene. Your contrast colors, your color decisions that you made. The shape of the tree is fascinating. I mean, how gorgeous is that? And what you could add to this is to take it one step further. We don't see the darks yet, so take some of that. Uh, what was it? Yellow, green, and purple. I guess were your two uh, complementary pair colors, right? And and mix that purple into the. I'm sorry, mix the yellow green into your uh, orange and yellow green and green, and try to get some really good darks now, like you saw with Sylvia's painting. With this, you saw how those darks made it jump to life. Well, this is already very alive, but some accent darks in the bark, and see if that what that does. I mean, I almost hate for you to have to do anything. I don't want you to ruin this one because this is quite gorgeous. But uh, what would some darks look like in this one or one very similar to it? And you should bring it back to us in a few months when we're back together again. If you're back with us, and um, let's see what that did to it. But you did a great job of leaving white paper. Did a great job with the colors and the shapes, and your treatment is much freer now, more relaxed. So this is more like the Bud Big style, more like the more abstract watercolor, expressive watercolor we've been talking about. So see, you've got a wide range of repertoire here, Carol, that you're working with, that you can do. Uh, yeah, Catherine says you have your own unique style. Just go with it. Oh, the sky. Painted the sky in alternating stripes, letting them dry. White paper. Oh, this was the other sky. Yep. Uh, then came in and yeah, you just let the pieces dry. So she did the kind of the glazing we've been doing, underpainting, let it dry. Yeah, it was nice. Good. So Carol's going to try a version of this one with some darks added into the mix. Yes, but it's quite beautiful. And this one is also so beautiful and striking. It's that exercise is in the Bud Biggs chapter, that second configuration of trees, and this is a gorgeous version, a gorgeous treatment of that. Did you? And look how free it is. This is completely different than the first two approaches. I mean, isn't this terrific? And isn't that striking against the white paper? Hmm. For some reason, Google Drive's not letting me expand it as much as I'd like to. But look at the warm and cool, the push-pull of the warm and the cool, push-pull. And you did put some beautiful darks in this one, which makes the bright colors sing out even more. And I love your treatment of the finer branch, the tiny branches with a fine brush point, the twigs. So you've got the contrast between the big shapes and the tiny little expressive shapes, the lines. Such good sense of design. Sylvia says, beautiful. Carol says, painting with light glazes is new for me, so I'm loving the pastel feel. Yeah, the layering that you're doing. Yeah, good. Yeah, I could stare at this one for a long time too and just enjoy it so much. This is something I'd put a mat around, hang up in my house. It's such a great shape, too. I mean, it's got all the design elements and principles we've been talking about. It sort of kind of happens naturally when you're approaching things with the right sequence in the right way, with the right techniques. You'll get design. And this is Carol's eye. You want to tell us about this one, Carol? It's very effective. Were you working on the highlight? I mean, you got it. I mean, the eye is very alive. Carol says, I'm not sure if they look like trees, but I like them anyway. Well, that's just it. You've abstracted them. You've created something new. It's a tree and something more, isn't it? Okay, now tell us about this eye. It's another great example of, well, first I've got a thought that's still dangling about the tree. That's our job, is to look for, you guys are all commenting about this incredible shape configuration. And this is our job in our sketchbook, where we're doing our little sketches and our little preliminaries and our thumbnails. We're always on the lookout for these intriguing shapes. And this is the heart of illustration, is the silhouette, the one big shape, complex shape that's going to dominate the picture. So we need to be on guard and looking, and the things we're sketching, if we see a potential for tweaking it, making the shape even more significant, more interesting, let's do it. That's the heart of it. This is the heart of illustration, are these being on the lookout, knowing something interesting when you see it, and capturing it and tweaking it, editing it if need be a little bit, to get that arresting, appealing configuration. Gesture has a lot to do with it, doesn't it? But also being real sensitive and alert to the positive and negative shapes that are happening as a result of the pattern that you're seeing. And you're the boss of it. You get to make it into whatever you want. So we're hunters for this kind of patterning configuration. Okay, Judith says the eye has captivated her. Yes, me too. Uh, okay, they're talking about very striking eye. Catherine says. Carol says, yesterday my therapist asked me to paint something about how I was feeling. I started with with an abstract, and then the eye came. Well, that's great. Well, see how this is still an abstract, isn't it? But with a slight sensitivity to the configuration, with just a few little directional changes, you've given us an eye that we all immediately recognize as an eye. It's still an abstract shape configuration, but you have told us just enough that we all see the eye. But it's so much more than just an eye. I mean, and And your therapist would probably say that too. He'd probably say it's so much more than just an eye, Carol. There's so much going on with this eye. But anyway, that's funny. So that's what you were feeling, huh? It's a great story. And that eye, Carol says, is a quarter large sheet, so it is pretty big. Judith says, wow, do more eyes. They're very expressive. And you could do a one woman show of nothing but these eyes and then invite your therapist. Dedicate the show to her. But it's very effective. It's a great example of wet into wet watercolor and then some wet on dry paper as well. And yeah, real sensitive treatment of the black iris in there. Look at all the different color that's happening in here. How pool-like and 3D it's feeling, like gazing into a marble. And watercolor painters love using the medium to look at these kinds of difficult subjects that play around with the light so much, like glass marbles, eyes, pools, creeks, running rivers, waterfalls, anything where the light is at play a 3D surface. People are scared to death of painting this sort of thing, but you don't have to be a photorealist to capture some of this um, light play. Judith says there's a story there somewhere. All right, so good. So that's the closest thing to a human figure we've seen in a while. So good, that's good. Got one more tree from Carol's, and it's yet another treatment of the tree. And it's even got a decal etched inside. It is, isn't it? Somebody carved something into the tree. I'm not sure what it is. Looks like 197. I don't know. But look at the lovely plays of warm and cool in this trunk and all the great white space. This is so different than the one that you thought was tight and we were calling it controlled. This is so free and so beautiful. And look at the glazing you've done on it, and look how you've created beautiful, various uh, negative spaces, but with the white paper that you've left. You were treating the white paper as shapes. Very obviously you were, and doesn't it pay off? And it looks almost like it reminds me of that kind of painting where you put um, oh, like the leaded part of leaded glass, and or, I'm sorry, of stained glass, and you peel away the or like masking fluid. Did you use masking fluid for this to create these white shapes? Anyway, you've really used them effectively. Again, it's a very decorative treatment and highly stylized, but freer than your other one that was so stylized. And the color is beautiful. Yeah, Catherine had the same reaction. Wow, did you save your white lines? Well done. The white lines have a life of their own. Reminds me of a scratch. Is it scratch? What kind of painting, Catherine? All right, watercolor masking fluid. Well, you've used it in a real original way. And what's nice is that you were using it the same way you were making your paint brush strokes because the lines look very much the same. So you've imbued this piece with a unity, right? Nice background sky too. I just now tuned into it with some dry brushing on the sky back there. Really nice. So if I were to cut up Carol's piece here into little pieces and then cut up Sylvia's painting into little pieces and mix them in a box, you'd be able to pull out Carol's pieces and Sylvia's pieces and reassemble their puzzles. Um, and that's because of the unity that both artists have imbued their pieces with. There's this consistent style throughout and treatment, not only color palette, that's part of it too, but the line quality, the color quality, the spirit, the sense of design. Yeah, Judith says she loves the scratch art is what Catherine was saying. So yeah, that's funny. Carol says I gave myself a thumb blister rubbing off masking. Catherine says where you start with color or black scratch off reveals white undercolor. Oh, she's explaining what it is. Yeah. And Phoebe has a real perceptive comment. I can see this tree as an illustration in a children's book. Yes, even like a cover. Huh. Yep. Great observation. Nobody was turning in lollipop trees tonight, were they? Okay, we got a new one up. Whose is this? Cat in a tree. Here's some figures for us. Beautiful sky treatment. Classic situation. Gail, good for you. Okay, so I want you to do this one, do a version of this again, Gail, and try to do the trees like we've been doing them tonight. Try a tree like this because this is how you were painting trees before you were doing the watercolor exercises, right? So now I think you can take this one step further. I mean, it's charming. I like it. I I I think you can take it a whole lot further. Okay. I mean, I see that you've got a controlled palette here. The colors are cool, and I see that you're being very uh, uh, restrained in your palette, and you're using a limited palette, and you're using the purple, yellow, green um, relationship. And yes, now do all that with more glazing in it, glazing opposite colors over each other, glazing your three analogous or best friend colors over each other, glazing the contrast color over them, and using that for shadows and darks. See, this tree is pretty light valued, and as I squint my eyes, I don't see the shaping and the dark, the contrast and the accents that the darks give us that help bring it into focus. So do you want to try a version of this with building up the tree color the way we were doing the tree exercise and bring it back to us? Because it's real cute and it's child friendly, and every kid is going to be interested in the story between these two characters for sure. Gail's going to do it. Yes, she's accepted the challenge. Great. Bless your heart. Can't wait to see it. I love your roots, very well developed down here. You're very thoughtful and true, and we believe it. I believe this tree. I just would love to see it kind of being psychedelic like some of these others. Now that we've explored this new way of painting, you can have some fun with it. Catherine says, I like how the kitten is looking down at the person. They are looking up, making eye contact. Yes, great job making a connection with each other. Yes, and that's why children will immediately respond to these guys, and they'll be interested in the story. They'll want to know more. They see the relationship. He's got a good gesture too as he's looking up. Pretty natural looking. And the cat is so clearly a young one, a kitten. Um, Judith says, I understand your restraint, but be courageous and try more texture using color. You will probably be better than you think you will. Of course you will. And Catherine says, I like those little yellow flowers too. Aren't they pretty? And don't they just echo the boy's blonde hair? Carol says, I like the way the branches and the roots mirror each other. Yes, it's really nice. Trees are such universal symbols, aren't they? And they tie into growth and development and young and old. And I mean, the tree is such a symbol. And Gail says it is part of a children's story. So great. It looks like it and it reads like that. Great. And that's what would be great to start to see is when we pick up again, um, you guys bringing some of these painterly techniques into scenes with characters and part of a story. If you don't even have a story yet, pretend you do, act like you do. Find an old folk song or nursery rhyme or uh, a fractured fairy tale that's in the public domain, and just you don't have to do the whole story. Just do some scenes from it as an excuse to try out some of this new painting that we're doing, putting your story characters in there. And now we'll have to have some backgrounds that sort of fit the story scene or where you're developing a sense of place. Carol says, and the kitty is so high up, the picture clearly tells the story problem. Yep. Nice texture of grass at the base of the tree as well. Yep. Okay, Gail, good. We look forward to seeing more of these guys. You've already got us engaged and involved with them. Let's see, Kathy, we saw this last time, didn't we? This is so cool the way you did these color shapes, glazed shapes. So I think we did see this one last time. And this is Virginia's piece. Let me see where we are on the. Oh yeah, okay. There's a bunch of new pieces that I hadn't seen. So good. So we'll doing good. You guys really loaded stuff up tonight. That's great. Um, yeah, so Virginia is working with the colors, and she did a really nice job with. This was not part of our exercises, but it might have been in one of the videos that other artists' videos that are on YouTube that I've linked to and recommended, and they're good practice. All those things are good to play with. Um, yeah, you're being real analytical with naming, giving labels to colors. And so I'm going to say we don't need to worry too much about labels and names and color names. And even in our sketchbook, I know a lot of painting teachers like you to do that and just keep swatches and ascribe paint colors to different squares. And I find myself, I find that kind of confusing to work with, and I get sort of lost, and then I get confused with I'm pretty word oriented anyway, and so then the words become more important than the color swatches or the painting itself, and then I start categorizing and um, and it doesn't even help me remember the colors that I did. So I'm going to encourage you guys to kind of get away from names of colors, except for the most basic elementary school childlike names: yellow, red, purple. And then after that, it gets too almost too analytical or too categorizing, and it has nothing to do with the experience of bumping compliments into each other and surprising yourself and delighting yourself. So uh, I just wanted to throw that out, Virginia. But these are great little color swatches with some beautiful broken neutral colors. I'm not quite sure what your process was. Were you mixing cobalt at one end and raw umber on the other? Or what were you mixing? It almost looks like you were taking neutrals and mixing them into colors, which is, um, or maybe, I don't know. I don't know what your process was down here. I would love to know. And I know you're not here with us tonight because you've had to go out and buy a new computer, or you're in the process of buying a new computer because your computer died, but you did want to share these with us tonight. So let's look at these again when we meet again and talk a little bit more about them. But I love that you're creating these neutrals and creating these grays and charcoals. And here you're playing, these are all different variations of blue and orange, ultramarine and cadmium orange with water. Yeah. And uh, but I wouldn't mix in other brand names of colors or manufacturers colors. Mineral violet, I don't know what that is. I don't have a tube painted mineral violet. Um, I that's but this might have been from another artist or another teacher's exercise, which is just fine. But I don't. I tried not to confuse myself with names and labels and which tube of paint I was using for which effect. That just gets too crazy too quickly. Okay. Carol says, I remember the names of my uh, favorite colors like Prussian blue and Payne's gray. Oh, that's funny, Carol. Those are my least two favorite. Those are among my least two favorite colors. So we'll have to have a conversation sometime. But it's all personal taste and stuff. But Payne's gray, you can make beautiful grays now with these complements, and you don't even need to buy a tube of Payne's gray. You can make a million variations of Payne's gray. Besides, every paint manufacturer is a kind of a different version of Payne's gray, and the colors and the tube the colors look different depending on the lighting in the room, conditions in the room, the atmosphere, the barometric pressure. I mean, there's a million. There's no way you can control um, paint colors by um, with that kind of precision in the studio when you're working on a piece. Uh, when you're doing it with traditional materials, now you can do it with uh, print technology, and you can do it with Photoshop, and you can say, I want this to be colors 7432, all the nuances of that. It's going to be the same every time under the right lighting conditions. um, and I'll just push a button and there's my color. Well, and so we're doing it differently with traditional medium. So it's two different approaches. Um, okay, I'll get off my soapbox on that. Carol, I don't want to take away from your fondness of Payne's gray. Everybody does love Payne's gray, and as soon as most people, it's one of their favorite colors. Um, and then Prussian blue. As soon as somebody has had experience with the Prussian blue, it's their favorite blue. But so we'll have fun. So you're not alone in your appreciation of those colors. Judy says, I like Prussian blue and Payne's gray, and and I have not been able to duplicate it with other colors. I was curious as to why Mark did not mention it at all, and now we all know. Yeah, well, the other thing about Payne's gray, no, I'm sorry, Prussian blue, is that it's mixed with that phthalo blue, which is a real intense dye. Anything with the word phthalo in the paint name, that's a real powerful dye, and it tends to be overwhelming in your palette. And once Prussian blue infiltrates some of your other colors and paint puddles, it takes over. I mean, it's hands down, it takes over, and you just lose control of your palette really fast. And I'm a little scared of the power of Prussian blue, and that's one reason why I'm so nervous about it. It's just the colors in my paint supply list are sedimentary colors, and they don't have the strong, intense dyes that some paint paints have. Um, and and so that's a big. I think it's a as far as color notes on the color wheel of one or the color spectrum of the rainbow. That Prussian blue is a gorgeous blue. It's that blue green quality, but it's very with Prussian blue. It's very intense. It's almost like phthalo blue. It's a beautiful blue. It's seductive in that way. But you can also get a kind of a Prussian blue by mixing Viridian with cobalt, and it's a much gentler, milder blue. But we can have fun talking about that some night. We'll We'll all sit over a bottle of wine in our respective stations, and we'll talk about it. Yeah, you might do some internet research on phthalo and blues and paint colors and paint chemistry because it is fascinating. Judith is still laughing. um, yeah, there's a phthalo purple too, for sure. And it is fun to explore different purples. I'm enjoying reading your comments. I have been able to get a color like Prussian blue by mixing. Yeah, yeah, I know. Prussian blue is great. There's one of my favorite painters and teachers out there is Tony Couch, and he loves Prussian blue, and he uses it in all of his exercises in his book. I think it's on your reading list. It's uh, Watercolor You Can Do It by Tony Couch, Couch. He uses a ton of Prussian blue, and I think he uses Payne's gray too. I'm just I'm in revolt against any two paint grays because I like how we're mixing grays with complementary colors from our simple 10 note color wheel. But it's fun to explore all these different paints. It's a wealth, such a wealth. Okay, all right. So there's Virginia. Sorry about that. You got us launched on a big discussion, didn't you? And here's a great job of Virginia taking two best friends. I see pairs of colors. I don't see the triumvirate, the three colors, the dominant color and the two best friends on either side of the color wheel. So you might review the color wheel video uh, again and try it. But this is great. You've got some gorgeous neutrals that you've created here with your exercise. Yes, yes, it's fun, very fun to see. And you were braver. You were actually mashing those colors up into each other. Of course, you're an experienced painter, and you were creating a lot of neutral, a lot of, you weren't afraid to mix it up. But all these paint names, oh my goodness, it's peach black, Payne's gray, rose madder. I'd love to hear from you next time what you were doing with these, because these are some interesting exercises. I'd love to hear what the sequence was and what was going on. But all of this is good to do. All of this informs us and gets us comfortable. Cadmium yellow, turquoise, cobalt, alizarin crimson. Okay. All right. So thank you for getting those in, Virginia. And let's look at Catherine's story scenes. Oh my goodness. Oh wow, Catherine. So you've got a little photograph scene with a painted backdrop. It's charming. And you've given the same light source. So you've got your light source coming maybe from the front and the side over here. And that's why there's shadows on the front of these guys and the front of the house. So can you have some cast shadows? Maybe these are cast shadows. They're not quite reading as dark as they might. Since you're implying some pretty strong light, and look how dark the cast shadows are in your photographed part of the scene. So you could deepen, and there'd be a lot of shadow in that backdrop, right? Of course, you're right. We don't want to upstage the characters with all our contrast back there. So don't make it overpowering. But I think you could stand to go a little darker. It looks a little washed out. But I love your painting behind that's going on with all this foliage in here. Are you feeling better with the process, Catherine? And I love how you, gosh, you got extra points for this. You've used the tree painting approach from the exercise in all of your trees. So you've totally fit your, look at these little sweet gum tree leaves in here in the tree, dazzling. This is so gorgeous. So you've You've incorporated the exercise and the painting technique into a story scene. Oh my gosh, you get so many extra points tonight. So if this is just the photograph, you can either put a little bit of a filter or a dampener on the light source to not make this light so intense, this light source so intense to create such dark shadows, or you can pump up the cast shadows in the background. But you have a handle on it, and you're painting sensitive to the light. So yeah, I think it's a real charming combination of puppet stage set and uh, photographed characters, like the old vaudeville stages, hand painted backdrops. There's something called a leaf brush. Does it stamp? Oh, the leaves are put in with Photoshop. Oh, okay. Well, you can tinker with the shadows in Photoshop, and you can tinker with these more photograph. I thought it looked a little artificially pumped up. So can you lighten some of this up in the there's a kind of an overpowering darkness in the photograph part of it, and you can just lighten that up maybe. But I would also deepen the shadows back here so that there is a strong difference between the ground that's receiving the light from the sky and the cast shadow part of the ground. We want to be able to feel those value changes as they happen. That's just our eyes are used to seeing it that way in nature. So play with it a little more. So you just dropped in these with a Photoshop brush. Wow. Well, it's quite effective. I think it's. What do you guys think? Is it effective? It looks so natural. That'd make a great, like in a kid's bedroom, along the molding at the top of the wall, all the way around the room or something. This kind of enchanted spring green forest. Judith says, I love it. You could maintain the style throughout the whole book. You could get away with it. Yeah, I think you could. Catherine says her biggest issue is she works at night, so she can't really see. I know it is frustrating. Um, yeah, it is frustrating to calibrate color and color relationships at night under lamps. It is. But on your computer screen with adjusting lightness and darkness, in your Photoshop sliders, you you might be able to get some good results. I mean, you've already got this great underpainting. You did a great job with these enchanted trees. You've enchanted the forest with all this color and glazing that you've done. But see how the house really needs a definitive cast shadow since other things are casting a shadow out in front. And it will help unify your background. Well, I don't know whether she laid them in, she'll have to tell us, but she's created this with little figures, actual figures, and she's lit it to some extent, and then she's photographed it. And then she either in the photograph, she dropped in her painted backdrop behind it, just like a little background on a stage. And I think that's what she did. And then she brought it into Photoshop and did some tweaking with it. Is that right, Catherine? And she also, yeah, she sculpts these are all her own creations. She sculpts all these original figures, animals and children. Sylvia says she likes the leaves, but she really likes the fading trees in the background. Oh, Catherine says not all the leaves are done in Photoshop, just a few. Okay. Well, there these. It's a nice combination of soft. I don't know why my computer's doing that. Of soft and hard-edged leaves makes it that contrast makes it sort of magical. It's just great that you're applying some of these painting techniques into your scenes. Figures are in one layer in Photoshop. Watercolor is a second layer in the back. Okay. Gail says, I love the way the background has been put in so softly, and it suggests that a very deep area behind the house beautifully. Yeah, it does. It really creates this, opens up this big sense of space, and it crams so much into this little rectangle, and it feels so rich and big. It's a scene. You get some good comments on this, Catherine. Carol says, I'm also wondering if you might bring some of the painted textures and palette onto some of your 3D figures. Yeah, could you do that? Are you able to do that? Um, you'll have to take us through a tutorial on how you use Photoshop some night, Catherine. And Catherine says there's a middle layer of grass between to stitch the layers together. There's a little layer of grass. I see a little layer of grass right over here. And is that painted on the backdrop? This reminds me of painting backdrops in elementary school for the stage productions and stuff. Okay, but see what's so cool is that Catherine sculpts all these, gives her a leg up on the rest of us on her character creation. And she can draw them from any angle she wants, right? Carol says, I love all the movement in this scene. Yeah, it's really, really spectacular. Now, how did I jump from here? Let's go to this guy. And this is all traditional medium. This is all watercolor. And this is charming. So it's got such control. And if I'm not mistaken, I see push-pull, warm, cool colors in this tree. The bear's figures are beautifully modeled. This is watercolor, right, Catherine? This reminds me of these charming kid decals that you'd put on kids' furniture, as well as storybooks and just all kinds of kid products. For really young children, look at the warm, cool on the fish. Look at this beautiful natural feeling of the splash rendered so gesturally. And look at the gesture on this guy. And he's swinging his rod. And we believe it. We believe this fish swinging on the end of the line here. It's quite charming. And yes, Catherine says watercolor. Beautiful glazing. So she was using she turned the iridescent fish colors, the conflict, the sizzle between the vibration between the conflict colors, complementary colors on the fish scales, which was one of the color exercises, and she's turned it into a scene. Isn't that beautiful? See this kind of vibration, just this iridescence happens with uh, complementary colors when you bump them into each other on watercolor paper, leaving white space, mashing up the color to get some neutrals and darkening it, and it creates 3D. And look at the modeling in the eye. It looks like a fish eye, a character, story character fish eye. So much sensitivity and such beautiful handling. And this whoops. I don't know what this little new feature is, and I guess it's trying to say, what do you want to highlight something in the scene? It's trying to highlight this guy. Same thing. Sylvia says, so well done. Love the water and splashes. The book is rather suspended in space. Yeah, but I believe it like he's just thrown it down. He's dropped the book and his excitement. He's mirroring the his little brother's adventure with the fish. He's got an imaginary fishing pole in his hand as he's identifying. He's empathizing with the action. And yeah, Catherine, to me, the book looks very dropped, very natural. All this whole picture looks so natural. This is a charming piece. And a nice handling of the paint, controlling the modeling with water and white paper to create shadows, form shadows on the figures. Beautifully drawn hands, action. Wow, so nice, Catherine. And now we have our little girl. This is starting to evoke something like Hansel and Gretel or something. Let's look at this scary black. Is she holding on to something? Looks like it's partly painted, partly real. Did you just lay her on the painting, your figure on the painting, Goldilocks, on and shoot down on her? And let's see, do these have to be so dark? This lovely framing device that reminds me of the Jaws from the Jaws movie, that shark's open mouth skeleton that Captain Quint had in his fishing shack, that big skeleton of a shark's mouth. It's kind of ominous. It's so dark, it kind of overpowers the composition a little bit. And she's suddenly dark in there too, and we don't see her because she's been darkened. So maybe you can do something with some spotlights, spotlighting and lightning, because then you got all this white area that looks a little bit like an overexposed photograph, too much light. Or is that an underexposed photograph? Help me with my terms. The light has blown out this center part of the scene, but it's neat because this passageway leading right to the house has got us intrigued. The narrative is there. Oh, Catherine says, I want her to look like she's going from a dark place to a bright light place of hope. Okay, so it's deliberate. Okay, well, cool. All right. Then if that's the case, could you use your digital tools to darken this whole outside of the frame, outside of the framing device? So put this back in the shadows too, but now we're light inside the perimeter. Okay. Yeah, she's going to work on the lighting. Yeah, just a little calibrating it, and like a painter would. You're These are all painterly issues and things we painters deal with throughout the process of completing a painting. Nothing new here. It's the same old story of juggling lights and darks and in between values. So yeah, would you want to bring your finished version? Yeah, I agree with Judith on the flowers that are so pretty. These little notes of pink and red add a lot of charm. Yeah, I do feel that these trees need to have darker cast shadows. All right, I could see this dark tree entrance before the gingerbread house and Hansel and Gretel. Yeah, me too. Where will the words go in this obvious double spread? Good question. Good question. The text block is part of your is part of your design. It's a design element in your composition. It's part of the composition. So if it's a story scene, you got to think about that. Of course, it could be the front piece or the back piece of the book or the end papers, or it could be the final page where there are no words, the benediction page, last page of the book on the left-hand side of the picture book, in which case you're not going to have words. And so we respect that too. Is it the same watercolor forest scene in the background with two sculpted gnarly trees and Goldie holding on? Okay, it's a book cover piece. Okay, in which case, where's your book title going to go? And that's nice. This could be. It's easy to see it as a book cover. Now the illustrator may not have to worry about placing the book cover text on his painting, or even worry about how to place it. Um, the art director will typically take it from there. Take this painting and handle the cover and the text, the lettering, any way he or she wants to. However, as the artist and the creator, and if you're self-publishing, certainly, you the responsibility of how to flow that text across the cover is all yours, and it needs to be part of your little thumbnail sketch and your fuller pencil drawing, and then you will not paint it in your final art painting, just like you won't hand letter your text unless you have a really deliberate thing you're doing. Uh, but you will have to sort of know where it's going to go, and then the book designer will be putting the text in for you. But you need to have a place for him that's where it's going to be easy compositionally to place that text. Judith says, very dramatic illustration, so find a way to work it out, she suggests. She encourages Catherine. Title going toward the bottom. Okay, well now that makes sense. That makes sense for all this white space. However, depending on how long the title is, you don't want it to make it feel squeezed inside this framing device. So maybe it's a real short title, in which case it will fit in there nicely. It'd be interesting if you could, since you're playing with Photoshop and stuff, it'd be interesting if you could try a variation of this in Photoshop with your text, cover text, flown, uh, what's the word? Flown, flowed, flowed, flowing into the space. Let us see what it will look like. I can almost easily see a short cover title fitting beautifully in that white space. Makes those tree shadows less important. Carol says, I love this sculpted tree frame. Uh, Catherine says, I tried to sculpt a heart-shaped silhouette shape in the tree. I think you kind of did it. Uh, plan on adding more dark branches in upper corner. Okay, so Catherine sculpted this as well. This is not a piece of driftwood or a found object. It's all, she's handcrafting everything. Okay, let's go to the next. I don't want to keep, I've kept you guys pretty late. Of course, this was our last night. So, yeah, this is just so gorgeous and so lovely. The drawing is beautiful, and the painting does nothing to upstage the drawing. The painting only enhances what is a lovely drawing gesture. kid friendly. I'm not sure you need all the lines in the face that you've got. So let's take a look at her. Maybe, but yeah, I don't. With kids' faces, you don't have to be. You don't have to, or with their arms and hands. You don't need to delineate a whole lot with your paint. Put a little form shadow in there, but you don't need to over develop it. You don't. Maybe about to the extent of, see how you're doing it with her ear here. That's about right, but uh, just be careful not to overpaint the child's form and skin. And that's one of the videos we're going to do later this summer, is about painting skin tones on children, and flesh tones for all different ethnicities, and we'll talk about that, and uh, maybe share some ideas with each other. Um, yeah, with children, we don't have to put in too many lines, because the viewer is going to fill in the lines, and children are um, lines are kind of a sadly they're a feature of age, and uh, and well, anyway, I think you know what I'm saying. We don't need to over delineate. Are her feet too small? No, kids' feet and hands are tend to be pretty small, and they're thrown back. Uh, I don't didn't wasn't bothered by the size of her hands or feet at all. Um, I mean, her fingers here are on her left hand are, since we're looking at anatomy, this hand looks a little, the thumb and fingers are a little big. I think you've got the proportion a little more natural to a, a 5-year-old girl over here. Here, it just got a little big. So you just watch that sort of thing. And then you've developed her palm more structurally. It feels a little more convincing over here. Chubby little wrist and palm. And I don't feel her palm setting quite on her carpal bones as well here. So there's something about this line here. I think it started to get too big on you, the whole thing. But so simplify your hands. Look at plenty of child reference, and you're right. Just practice. Yeah, we all have to do it. We all struggle with it. This detailing on her shirt is just gorgeous. Beautiful effect. It looks like a stitch in her shirt. So your details, your sense of motion and gesture and life in all of your kid drawings is just uh, so true. And I'd like to. Whose idea was this? Carol's of soft focus for some of this woods back here. Yeah, you could try a version of this backdrop where this further back row of trees in the forest you've painted in the wet into wet motion, wet into wet approach, and so they're fuzzy and they go back in space, like it's out of the depth of field, out of the camera range, and suddenly it's kind of, in the house too, it's kind of out of focus back there. However, if this is supposed to be a cheerful, sunny, clear uh, new beginning, then maybe you do want this crystal clear, this clarity and the detail going back in space. So you can argue both ways. Judith suggests that the legs are a bit confusing on the jumping girl. Let's see. No, I'm not bothered by her legs at all. They feel like she's in midair in a little jump. But yeah, no, I would start to get a portfolio, filling a portfolio with um, your little your little young characters that you've drawn and painted. Have two parts of your portfolio. One is your little stage sets with your little sculpted creations and backdrops, and one with your paintings. And just start getting some volume going, lots of images like these, and pick out your 10% best. Okay, let's, we've got it, don't we? I'm going to refresh